Hey, it's Cynthia Morris, and I had this crazy idea to come on Facebook Live and share the books that I'm reading this week. Now, I am a lifelong bibliophile, and when I think back to my childhood, the image that comes to mind is a picture of me at the library, leaving the library with a giant stack of books. Now, when you're a kid, that works. That's fine because the books are thin, they're small. The books are easy to read in a day or two. Children's books, when you're a kid, they're picture books, so they go really quickly. So flash forward to now when I am still going to the library at least once a week and carting home a giant stack of books that looks like this. Well, something's changed since I was a child. The books that I read are bigger and more intellectually demanding than the picture books I read as a kid. Hi, Linda. Hi, Jean. I'm glad you're here. I know you're bookworms too, so thanks for joining me. So I just wanted to talk about the books I'm reading this week. I was a bookseller for many years here in Denver at Capitol Hill Books, which is a secondhand bookstore right across from the state capitol. And that's where I kind of grew up. I had my sort of graduate school where I was able to read the books that I wanted to read. I learned so much about people and the world through reading books there and through interacting with all kinds of people who came by the capitol and who cruised Colfax. So I thought, well, I just love telling people about the books that I'm reading. I just love to share books. So why don't I do that here on a Facebook Live? Hi, Ivana. Hi, Dimple. Dimple. Okay, so to keep myself honest, I chose only the stack of books that I have actually been reading this week. I have about 20 books that are on my stack, and I showed a picture of the books I was reading last week. But I'm not reading the same books this week. Some of them are the same, some of them are different. So I looked at my stack and I said, okay, Cynthia, what have you actually been reading this week? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 books that I've been reading this week. And if you have questions about how I read so many, how I find time to read and still work and have a life, I'm happy to answer any questions about reading because I am a lifelong bibliophile. Okay, here we go. What am I reading this week? Before we start, I need to say I am in love with the library, and I give a huge shout out here to the Denver Public Library for feeding my library habit. They are just incredible, and whenever I hear about a book that sounds interesting, that I want to read, I'm able to go onto the Denver Public Library website and search for the book. If they don't have the book, I'm able to search in the prospector service, which allows me to get books from nearby states. So I'm finally recognizing that like a giant stack of books like this every week is actually not sane. It really speaks to my gluttonous personality. I mean, at least I'm not buying all the books, but am I really actually able to read this many books in a week? No. So I would like to maybe change it up. Maybe when I hear about a book that I want to read, I put it on my to-read list, but I can't help but want to just go get the book immediately and look it over. So most of these books are from the library, and that keeps me from going bankrupt. Okay, first book I'm reading is I'm looking at books about Kauai because I'm going there in April for my honeymoon. And I just went to the library and just chose a bunch of books that are about Kauai, the island in Hawaii. And so just to vet them. And so Lonely Planet, I'm probably not going to buy this one to take with me, but I wanted to read it first because the one that I'm going to buy, I don't need to read right away. What do you think the first thing I do when I get a guidebook is? What part do you think I look at first? Feel free to make a comment. If you know me well, you know the part that I will go to immediately. So I'm curious to know what you think about that. Okay, so in the same vein of travel, I'm reading Lost Japan by Alex Kerr. One of my friends in France recommended this book to me after I went to Japan in November, and this is Yes, food. Yes, Karen Ward, you were right. Ivana, yes. Where am I going to eat in that place? That is exactly what I look at first. Where am I going to eat? Because frankly, it's all about the food. And if there's a place that I haven't traveled to, probably it's because I'm not interested in the food. Speaking of food in Japan, the food was incredible. Every meal was a giant wow, and I felt like a 5-year-old just fascinated with all the textures and flavors, and how they presented it was amazing. So it's fun to read up about a place before you go. Studies show that anticipating something contributes to our happiness as much as experiencing it, and I find that's really true. I love planning a trip and imagining what I'll do, and planning almost as much as I love going. So when I was in Japan, I just fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with the food and the art and the architecture. And also my friend Jija, who was with me, she was really aware of the fading of a lot of the traditions in Japan, the traditional art and artisans. And so one of my friends recommended this book to me, Lost Japan, Last Glimpse of Beautiful Japan. And this was written 20 years ago, but there's a foreword by the author from a few years ago saying that it's still true. Things, agriculture and art and some of the traditions are disappearing. So thank you to Elka for recommending this book to me. I just finally got it. I ordered it in December, and I've just read the introduction, and I can't wait to read more. Okay, speaking of armchair travel, don't we love to read a good book that helps us feel like we're in some other place? So the next book that I'm reading is called L'Appart, The Delights and Disasters of Making My Paris Home by David Leibovitz. L'Appart is French. The French like to shorten the word appartement, which means apartment, to L'Appart. So this is David's most recent book about buying and renovating an apartment in Paris. David Leibovitz, if you don't know him, he's an American who moved to Paris some years ago, and he's a pastry chef and dessert chef. So his first books were about making desserts, making pastries, ice cream. He did a pastry app of all the pastry shops in Paris that you should go to. And he also wrote a memoir called The Sweet Life in Paris, and then his other book, My Paris Kitchen, which is a cookbook. So most of his books are cookbooks. The Sweet Life in Paris is more of a memoir. I think all of his books have recipes. So when I heard about this one, I really wanted to check it out. So I put myself on the list at the library. I was number 80 of 89 people who wanted to read this book. And David isn't just a great blogger. If you know his blog, just look up David Leibovitz, and that's how you spell his last name. He was one of the early great food bloggers in my mind. Fantastic pictures and really good writing. He's actually not just a pretty face and a pastry chef. He's a really good writer. So his books are very compelling. So I've been reading this at night. I'm only this far in, but I'm loving it. And one of the things I love, I've actually met David in Paris. My friend Heather Stimler Hall introduced me to him. And when I was there in 2005, I went to dinner at David's apartment with my friend Heather. And that's where I learned two things about life and food in France. One, that's where I tasted rosé and learned that rosé is the most fantastic wine to drink in the summer. It's crisp, it's light, it's fresh, it's sharp, it's got a great acidity. It's not sweet at all. It is not a sugary dessert wine. So that's when I learned, rosé, that's the thing to drink in the summer. And the second thing is salmon burgers. He made salmon burgers for us, and I'd never had that, and that was fabulous. He had an incredible view from that apartment in the Bastille. And I loved kind of meeting somebody who was famous, a blogger, a food blogger. The cool thing about reading this book is he describes that apartment in detail at the beginning of the book. And I'm sitting there in my bed reading, like, ooh, I was there, I've been there. That was really fun. I mean, when do you get a chance to read a book and know that you were in that place at that time? So David Leibovitz, L'Appart. I'm recommending this because it's just fun to kind of be in on somebody's renovation process. And I want to say, like, if you ever wanted to buy and renovate an apartment in Paris, this is the cure. You will not want to do it. If you read this, the French bureaucracy just seems like a real nightmare. So anyway, I definitely recommend it, and I'm only a little way through. Hi, Denise and Jane and Rhiannon and Karen and Carrie. Glad you guys are here to share my bookish love. So when I was a girl, one of my regrets in life is that I was a young reader and I didn't really have anybody who was kind of pointing me toward the good things to read. So when I was a kid, this is what I read. I read Danielle Steele and Stephen King and lots of horror novels. I don't think those are necessarily bad. Danielle Steele books really created a desire for me to live an exciting life outside of Ohio, and Stephen King's books really inspired me to be a writer. So what I would do, I would go to the library and I would just wander around the new books and look for what would appeal to me, what would I read. I just discovered books on my own. And I think that's what's great about the library or a bookstore. You can just go and try things. And with the library, you can check it out and there's no harm, no foul if you don't like it or don't want to read it. So I was at the library the other day and I saw this book, Faith Fox by Jane Gardam. And I just thought this looked interesting. What I do is I read the back cover this from in this book. It's in the inside flap. And I read the first paragraph or two and do I want to read that? This is put out by Europa Editions. And that's a publishing house that publishes books mostly by European writers. And they're usually high quality, usually very interesting. Elena Ferrante's books are published by Europa. Her it's not a trilogy, it's a what is it called when it's a series of 4 books, a quadrilogy, a quadrology, a quadrant. No. If anybody knows what that's called, tell me. So this appealed to me and I picked it up. It's about a young girl, a girl who's born and her mother dies in childbirth and nobody really wants to raise her. And she's kind of raised by a ragtag group of people and her uncles. Hey, Judith. Hey, Jude. Elizabeth, Katie, Kate. Hi, it's great to see you guys here, hearing me talk about my bookish love. So this one, it's not armchair travel, but it is set in England and it's fun to read books that are set in another culture. And ironically, this book was published 20 years ago, similar to the Lost Japan book, and was reissued. So I found that was an unusual connection. So far, I'm not very far into this one. I'm only about, 100 pages in, but I'm loving it. The characters are interesting and well drawn and well depicted. I think when you're writing a novel and you're writing about your characters, you want to depict them in a way that shows kind of their unique human thumbprint, their human blueprint, and also make you care about them and feel connected to them. So far, Jane Gardam is doing that in this book. Okay. So I posted on my One True Line today that today I'm doing at least 2 bold moves, and this Facebook Live is not one of them, although I'm giving myself credit for being the 3rd bold move to just go live and talk about the books I love. The bold move that I am making today, I'll share with you here, is I am applying for a TEDx Mile High talk. So it's always something that I've wanted to do a TEDx talk. I've done a Creative Mornings talk. And if you're unfamiliar with the basic concept of it, I'm sure you are, but I'll just say, to me, the way I think of it is, what do you want to say to the world? If you have 15 minutes in front of the world, what is the thing that you want to say? And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I often give this assignment to my clients. What is your 15-minute talk? Whether you're going to apply for a talk or not, what would you say? Thanks, Karen. What is it that you just must say? So there's so many things I want to say to the world to encourage people to be creatively empowered, but I finally winnowed it down to one thing that I believe is important and that we need. Thanks, Carrie. It's exciting to me too. So I'm not going to share what the content of the talk is right now. I might do that later. I'm going to be submitting it later this afternoon, so I don't want to jinx it anyhow. Anyway, but what I was reading yesterday was this book, How to Deliver a TED Talk, Secrets of the World's Most Inspiring Presentations. And I was waiting for an appointment. If you wonder, I think Karen said, how do you read so many? I never leave the house without a book, so I was going to an appointment, and because I'm ridiculously punctual, which means I'm usually 15 minutes early, I had this book. And to me, you don't have to read the entire book to glean something from it. You can read just some of the salient details. And also sometimes with books like this, like how to deliver a talk, I find that there's usually one or two things that are helpful to me. If I read too much and then I'm trying to follow every single thing, then I kind of drain the life and the Cynthia out of the talk. And he talks about this over preparing. And I feel like I did that in the last two talks that I did. I was trying to do them well and follow the formula. And in the process, I feel like I left myself out of the, my unique flavor out of the talk. So he talked about that, and I felt validated. So what I'm going to do is take a few things from this and then just run with what I want to do myself, which is actually kind of the theme of the talk. In that vein, I wanted to return to a couple of resources that speak to the thing I'm talking about. This book, I read this last year, Creative Change by Jennifer Mueller, Why We Resist It, How We Can Embrace It. And this book was fascinating to me, and it's research rich, so there's a lot of evidence in it about how we act, like human behavior, sociological behavior, and what's really going on. And I loved this book because what I thought was interesting, that there's so much lip service paid to creativity. Be more creative, and corporations say like the number 2 thing that they want is for people to be creative. Like leaders are requested or required or thought that they should be more creative. And in that regard, I think they're talking about being innovative, being able to innovate. There are lots of different ways to be creative. Innovation is one. But in reality, when we're confronted with or presented with a creative idea, Jennifer found that we resist. We don't want to adopt or take on a creative idea. And what we do is we will only take on a creative idea when we've seen others take on a creative idea. So that's so fascinating to me. It really speaks to how like the bar seems to be really high for leaving our comfort zone or sticking our necks out or being different or presenting an opinion, because people will resist it. If somebody sticks their neck out and presents an idea and then other people like it, then, hi Brian, then people will adopt the idea. So, when I hear that, I'm like, what a bunch of freaking wimps we are. Like, we're really not able to just say like, yeah, that crazy thing, I like that. But I think it's just deeper than that. I think we're very tribal, and like just things that we're not even conscious of how much we are socially, the word dominated is coming to mind, how much we act only because other people have shown that it's safe to do so. So I wanted to kind of get some research from this book and read a little bit more about that and read this more thoroughly for my talk. I highly recommend this. If you are in the innovation field, Karen Ward, you would love this book. If you're in innovation or change or creativity in any professional way, I totally recommend Creative Change by Jennifer Mueller. Okay, here's another book that's in the same vein. This is Bored and Brilliant, How Spacing Out Can Unlock Your Most Productive and Creative Self by Manoush Zomorodi. I think that's her first name, Manoush. Manoush, like what a cool name is that? Yeah, Manoush Zomorodi. So this book came about, Manoush has a podcast called Note to Self, and it's just a great podcast that looks at our relationship with technology and how we interact with technology. And a couple of years ago, she does these mini challenges. So a couple of years ago, she did a challenge called Bored and Brilliant. And it was, I might not know all the details of the challenge, but in my memory, I recall it being a 6-day challenge that had, for the purpose of kind of being more conscious of your consumption of technology and kind of retraining ourselves. What I believe is that we all jumped on the smartphones and using technology with gusto, and we had no training. There was no training in realizing what we were doing when we do that we are changing our brains and changing our behavior and changing our way of being in the world and with others by using the phone, the dopamine hit that we get just by looking at or picking up the phone. So her Bored and Brilliant challenge was a way of kind of retraining ourselves. So some of the challenges they're very simple, but not always easy to enact. One was spend a day not walking, or maybe it was 6 weeks. Maybe you had to do it every week for the whole week. Don't walk around with your phone. So you know how we're going from the car to home and we're looking at our phone, or we're texting, or we're playing Words with Friends like I am, whatever we're doing with our phone, like keep it in your pocket while you're walking and just actually be in the world. Another one was to delete an app. And then another one was to keep your phone away from you. Don't have it in your pocket. Keep it in your purse or your backpack or something like that. And she did this experiment with thousands of people, and it was really fascinating what resulted from it. And her basic premise of the book is that when we are in a kind of a void state or spacing out or not doing something, that's when our creativity comes to us. So there's this whole thing of like, I don't want to ever be bored. I'm going to always be looking at my phone because heaven forbid I be bored or be alone. That's actually where the sweet spot is. And that, again, is kind of one of the core messages of my talk. So I wanted to look at some of the research that this is just very dense with research. This is not my kind of book. I don't really need a book that's like citing all kinds of sources and research. But that's what this book is. So highly recommend Bored and Brilliant by Manoush Zomorodi, as well as her podcast, Note to Self. And she's just charming too. Okay, so we all have our hobbies, and one of my hobbies is succulents. Here in Colorado, it's fairly arid, and I haven't ever really been able to keep many plants alive other than succulents, so I just kind of go crazy, and I even smuggled some succulents home from Paris last year, and they're flourishing over here, really happy. So I wonder sometimes, like, what's going on with that one? Why is it all twisty and weird, or why is it dropping leaves, or why is it not happy? And I've been searching for a book that is kind of a diagnostic book. Like, this is, if you see this, this is what's going on. If you see this happening, this is what's going on. So I keep checking books out from the library about succulents. This one is by Deborah Lee Baldwin, Designing with Succulents. And it's not really what I want. It's more of a book about, well, this was the first page I opened to, is a pot. But it's more about landscaping and landscaping with succulents. So I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't there were only a couple of pages about pot gardening, but I really enjoyed sitting on the couch the other night looking at this and looking at all the different kinds of succulents there are and just marveling at the beauty of succulents and just the variety. So this was just a fun kind of coffee table book. I'll probably be taking this back to the library soon because it's not exactly the diagnostic book I want. If anybody knows about a book about succulents that's kind of here's what's wrong with your succulent, here's how to fix that, feel free to recommend that in the comments. Okay, Karen, I saw that. I've got one more book to share, but Karen had a question. How you read so many? Do you read everyone in full speed read? I love reading, and I'm a great reader and skimmer, but don't always finish. Tips and tricks. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to share that. All right, the final book that I bought the other day at the Boulder bookstore, I try to buy my books at the local bookstores when I can, is called A Glorious Freedom, Older Women Leading Extraordinary Lives by one of my favorite people and illustrators and authors, Lisa Condon. This is Lisa's most recent book, and what she did was interviews and profiles about women who were living extraordinary lives. And look at the page I opened to, Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the Little House on the Prairie series, which was a huge influence on me as a girl. I love Lisa's portraits of the people she's profiling. I think she's got a real knack for drawing people and capturing them and writing about them. So I just started reading this book and I'm loving it. And the first person in the book is a woman named Carolyn Paul, who was a firefighter in San Francisco, and she's written many books. And she took up surfing at the age of 50. And I was so emboldened just by that. I had been on the fence about whether I should learn scuba diving. My husband is a scuba diver and he wants to go scuba diving with me. So I've been kind of on the fence about, oh, should I learn it? It's something new. And that's all the, the technical elements of the things. I could die. And do I want to do it? And after I read about Carolyn Paul taking up surfing at age 50, I was like, hell yes, I'm going to go learn how to scuba dive now, right now. And I'm not going to wait. Tell you, turning 50 was like an instant up level for me. It just really motivated me to do the things that I want to do and to just be more myself. So if anybody's feeling old or uninspired, or you're just like, oh, it's too late, or I don't really have the chutzpah to do that, this is the book to just tell you that all of those little small voices in your head are wrong. So I love this book, and it's great. Lots, also some of Lisa's fun illustrations in here. It's by Chronicle Books. Chronicle Books is probably my favorite publisher. They publish all kinds of really creative and fun books. My favorite book department in the bookstore is the gift book section. You'll find a lot of Chronicle books in there. They made, I think, what I consider kind of a misstep in this book. I don't know if you can tell, but the print is extremely small. And even with my reading glasses, it's small. So Chronicle, come on. Like, if you're writing a book, I'm not saying Lisa did this, but Chronicle, if you're publishing a book for older people to be inspired, make sure that they can read it and see it. Okay, that's just my one little criticism of that book. But all in all, it's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. So Karen was like, how do you read all these? So there are certain times of the day that I read, and I'm kind of strict about my reading patterns. I never read in the morning. If I get into a book in the morning, then I'm kind of in some other world. I know a lot of people will read their spiritual texts, whether it's the Bible or inspirational books, they'll read those in the morning. I think that's a great idea, and I would like to do that, but I don't really read in the morning. The first time I'm reading is usually at lunch, and I always try to read at lunch. This kind of goes back to the days when I was a bookseller and I would have an hour-long lunch break. That's an hour long. It's a really long lunch. Takes just 20 minutes to eat, so that's a lot of reading time. So I got in the habit of reading at lunch, and that's when I read my nonfiction books. I always take a book with me, and at least one or two, and even if I can just read a little bit of it, then like at the coffee shop or while I'm waiting for something at the post office, then I feel like I've gotten my reading in. At night before bed, I read fiction. That's when I read my novels or like David's memoir. Find that reading books at night, reading fiction specifically at night before I go to sleep, really helps me to kind of turn off my thinking mind about my life and my day or anything I'm worrying about or thinking about, and allows me to really just kind of enter into another world and go to sleep more easily. When I travel and I don't have a novel with me, I find it's very hard to get to sleep. I do not read nonfiction books at night. No how-to, nothing that's really about like triggering my business brain or my creative brain. I don't want to be getting ideas or inspiration at night. I want to be kind of shutting down the thinking process and shutting down the active mind. So I don't read like a book like a novel or the memoir that's a narrative. I do read the whole thing if I like it. If it's good, I'll read the whole thing. Like the guidebook, I'm not reading every word. No. A Glorious Freedom, this is the kind of book with kind of episodic chapters. It's just like, a different person highlighted every chapter. I'm not going to be reading this, cover to cover in one go. This is the kind of thing that's a little bit like a coffee table book that you pick up and you'll read about one person or two people. This is a great book to read at lunch because I can read about one or two people and be inspired, and then kind of that directly affects the way I live my life. I love books like that kind of inspire me to be my better self and take action right away. And then the books like these that are really research rich, I will often skim. I don't really want to get sucked into the case studies or the stories. I really like to just like, all right, what's the point? What is the one thing that I'm going to take away from this? And when I'm thinking about books or recommending books, back to being a bookseller, it's always like, what's the 30-second thing I would say about this book? What would I say? And so I try to look for what's the one thing that I'm taking away from this book. Like, what is this book doing for me? What is this? How is this changing my life? And so that's kind of what I've tried to do today when I said this thing about creative change, that we're actually quite resistant to change, like that really kind of changed the way I think about things and how I approach my work and my creativity. So I'm really, those kind of nonfiction how-to books or research books that like this, I'm really just looking for what's the one or two things that's going to change how I operate. And I trust that whatever I'm getting from it is what I need. I don't necessarily have to read the entire book. So I hope that answers that question. Does anybody have any other questions or want to share anything about books they're reading before we sign off? This has been really fun for me. As you can tell, I could talk about books all day long, and really just love sharing books with people, because that just kind of goes back to one of the things about me and my nature is that when I learn something or find something I love, I immediately want to let everybody know. So, okay, you said husband. Yes, I'm married, Rick, Charlie. Hi, Dana. Hi, Rick. Hi, Liz. Hi, Andy. Yay. Virginia, Karen. This is great. I'm thinking I'm going to do this more. And Andy, this is for you. This is doing Facebook Live is kind of like my step into doing more videos. I've been kind of in the green room of making more videos lately, and I want to do more. And so this is a way for me to kind of get over being camera shy. So it's always easy for me, and this just in case this is inspiring for anybody else, whenever I have started doing videos or resumed doing videos, I always start with the books. Like, it's easier for me to talk about the books I'm reading or books that I recommend than to talk about something, my idea or something that I want to share. So books are so great. I kind of live for books. I live for reading books. I live for sharing books. I live for writing books. I live for helping people write books. And this is just who I've always been my entire life. So I'm going to keep sharing books. I'm going to do it this way. Maybe I'm not going to say I'm going to definitely commit to Friday reads every Friday, reading or sharing books, but this is a good start. So if you liked this, I'm going to post the video, share it with your friends, and feel free to comment with whatever books you're reading or what inspires you about books. I'm going to just keep going about books for the rest of my life. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Any last comments or questions before I sign off? Oh, I hope you all have a great weekend. I hope the books you're reading are inspiring you, and I hope you're reading books that you want to share with others. So thanks so much for joining. I'll see you later. Bye. Finish.